Hi everyone, this is Veda from Zephyr Lake Carmelite Mission. I just sent out an email and posted online that the novena to Our Lady of Mount Carmel started yesterday, and there is a priest by the name Christopher LaRocca from the Discalced Carmelites who's doing a daily meditation and reflection for the novena. So please look for that post or that email and follow along. It's beautiful. You know, each year God inspires us to participate in particular novenas because there are so many that different people do. But I think this year I found Father Christopher LaRocca's novena to be very inspiring, so I shared it with you. I hope you will find it the same way inspiring. The topic for today is spiritual direction, and we all know that Jesus himself directs us through our prayer life and through the scripture, and also in the reception of the sacraments and through the work of the Holy Spirit in our souls, who is present also among us in the form of our community of believers. However, we all still need a person to be a spiritual director. Because we are still living in the flesh on this earth, more often than not, we need counsel from someone who is wiser than us, who has a deeper prayer life than us, to help us to grow spiritually. Anyone who wishes to grow spiritually must seek the counsel of a good spiritual director. Generally speaking, those who are baptized and already frequent the sacraments are typically also the same kind of people who have spiritual directors. However, in my opinion, in my personal view, I really think that should not be the case. Everybody who is seeking to grow closer to God, to know more about God, need a spiritual director to guide them along the right path, so they make progress without wasting their effort pursuing the wrong paths or even getting lost. Often, it's lack of humility when we try to keep pursuing our spiritual goals on our own without seeking the help of, a wise spiritual director or some advice from spiritual person. Just like how without a coach, a person cannot refine his or her sports skills or any other skills, similarly with spiritual growth, we need a coach or a spiritual director. Even those who don't believe in the existence of God or are agnostic should still seek out a good counselor so they can make progress in their discernment and in their journey of discovering the unseen realities, and not to miss out on this essential part of their life, because we are made of just not the body and the mind, but we also have a spirit. In spiritual direction, we don't make a confession, which is a sacrament of reconciliation. That is a separate, that's separate from spiritual direction. In spiritual direction, it can be a help for everyone, even those who are not Catholics can benefit from spiritual direction. But confession is only for Catholics who are baptized and who have made their first penance. And often we hear that there are no spiritual directors or they are hard to find. And this is very true. But we also should remember that to find the right spiritual director, it's a process and it takes time and it takes prayer and patience. So don't give up easily. Keep at it in prayer. And we see in the Bible that God himself chooses a spiritual director for us. As an example, in the book of Daniel, we read that the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, he had many dreams and visions, but no one, all the people who were close to him, no one could help him to find the meaning and the interpretation except Daniel. Daniel, the prophet, was the only one who was able to interpret for him correctly the right meaning. Similarly, in the book of Exodus, we see Joseph, who is a slave in Egypt, and the Pharaoh has dreams, and nobody is able to interpret it except Joseph. And not only does Joseph interpret the dream, but he also executes the solution and saves everybody from the great famine that hit Egypt and other parts of the world in that time. So we know that we have to be patient, we need to persevere, and we will find a spiritual director eventually. And also these two stories are a good example of how God himself chooses the right person to help us with our own spiritual growth. This also brings me to the next point, which is how to choose a spiritual director. The important thing is first to recognize that we need a spiritual director. Second, we must pray for that person or the person because we may not know who it is. Third, we must allow God to help us to choose the person for us, and we must seek to recognize that person. Finally, we must trust God, not the person. For everyone, even the spiritual directors are not free from sin and selfishness. So we must pray and we must trust in God that God will make use of our spiritual director to help us in our spiritual growth. And the person who trusts God will not be at fault, even if the spiritual director sometimes gives some advice that may not be the right advice. But because the person is trusting in God and turning to the spiritual director with that mindset and with that disposition of heart, God will turn even those bad advices into the good and for the glory of God. So you can, be rest assured that if you trust God and go to the spiritual director with that mindset and disposition of heart, you will be safe and fine. The spiritual director must not only be a holy man or woman who's seeking their own spiritual growth, but the spiritual director should be a unifier, not a divider. Somebody who is a peacemaker, who brings unity within families, who brings unity within the community, and a person of deep prayer, and one who is personally seeking his or her holiness. And a spiritual director must be able to help the person make real progress, tangible progress in their spiritual life, and should not be a hindrance, like giving them, some advice that may not really help them spiritually. And a spiritual director must also have had some kind of a religious formation or have been through a spiritual direction workshop or a course. Generally, the priests, the nuns, and also the lay Carmelites, we have 6 years of formation, and other third order laity also go through formation. So these communities, people in these communities, they've received years of formal formation, so they can be good spiritual directors. So in meeting the spiritual director, the person can share his or her present status of their spiritual life. They might have personal problems, but that is not really the focus of spiritual direction. Spiritual direction focuses on this person's spiritual life, not on their personal problems. And then the person can share any questions or concerns they have, any explanations they need, and if they've had any mystical experiences in prayer or any other occurrences, natural or supernatural incidents that they are unable to understand themselves or explain, they can share all that with the spiritual director. And in fact, one must share that with the spiritual director. And the spiritual director is the one who is given the light of understanding to be able to understand and even interpret more clearly the meaning and relevance of those incidents, events, experiences to that person's spiritual life or for the broader community. So like Daniel, who interpreted the dreams of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, and like Joseph, who interpreted the Pharaoh's dreams, the spiritual director will be the one who would have the closer interpretation to your own mystical experiences. And I can share with you, just based on my interaction with my Carmelite friends, that if you pray and if you're fasting and praying in a regular way, most likely you will have some experiences. It may not be like a big public apparition, but you will have some experiences, and you need to share that with your spiritual director so they can help you with your discernment. Also, when making important decisions in life, while we ought to fast and pray for ourselves about it, it is also a very good practice to discuss those major decisions, life decisions, with the spiritual director, because the spiritual director can give us advice from a spiritual point of view, which is important in those life decisions. And speaking with your spiritual director as often as you need is a good idea, but at least you should talk to the spiritual director once a year. And typically people meet on a monthly basis, or at least once every 2 to 3 months, 3 or 4 times a year. Those are all typical, but it is based on the person's availability and your need. And so, this is all based on my personal view and based on my own experience. But be sure to find a spiritual director, because without a spiritual director, it'll be difficult for you to make your spirituality the focus of your life, your way of life, and to actually experience growth. And also remember that the spiritual direction is good for all people, not just for the religious or the priests or just for some who think they are mystics. No, it's for everyone, and not even like for Catholics only, or Christians, but for all people of all faith and people with no faith, because everybody has to start somewhere in their spiritual journey, and everybody can, benefit from having a spiritual director. So that is my thought. That's my personal point of view. And finally, if you're able to be a spiritual director and someone approaches you, before saying that you are busy or you have no time or you feel reluctant and you decline to assist that person, think hard and pray about it, because you may be that one person who can guide this person and bring this person to a greater holiness, a greater conversion you can bring about in that person's life. And if you say no, that is probably going to not be for his benefit, and you probably also will be accountable for that. So remember, like Saint Augustine was such an intellectual. However, he needed Saint Ambrose for his conversion experience. So think hard before you say no. Of course, you have to be practical too, but think about it. And all of this is my own personal view based on my own experience and what I've read and heard from other friends of mine. It's ultimately the decision of each person. They have to make it for themselves based on their own current situation, be it the one seeking direction or the one who is giving direction. And there are many books written by good spiritual directors that can help us further in this decision and process. And there are workshops and even courses that are available in many online and campus-based educational institution for spiritual direction for those of you who are not a religious or a priest or a third order who has received formation to be able to pursue this particular help that you can provide, ministry that you can provide to others. And even if you've gone through formation, it's still a good idea to go through a spiritual direction course to get certified. And it's just going to be more helpful for you and to be able to direct people in the proper way. So that's all I have for today. I hope you have a blessed weekend, and hopefully you're going to be praying that novena, the link that I sent to the novena from the Carmelite Institute for the next 8 days, and then the 9th day is the feast itself, and there will be a reflection on July 16th. May God bless you and have a blessed day.